All right, Richie,
Hi, Mark. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Great. Um, thank you. Thank you very much for this course. I've been away for a number of the sessions, and so I was listening to them after the fact, doing readings here or traveling there or whatever. Um, but I um, but I also, you know, I started thinking of, well, what does integrity have to do with meditation? And where did this topic come from? And is this really a stretch? Um, but I realized that there were a lot of aspects of what you said that really touched me. That last week you talked about doing your best, and I realized after the fact, for me, it really struck me more as being your best. It's not so much in the things you try to do or the things I try to do, am I going to do them well, as how am I acting, and is that the best me that I um, that that I can be, and in that way, it really does seem like it's, as you said, it's something that's felt. You can feel like that wasn't really that wasn't really right. I didn't really I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. And one of the ways that very early on, when you spoke about attuned speech, um, I found myself saying something to a young musician that I was working with about another musician um, who he was, I guess, looking to as a sort of a mentor. And this person was, I was seeing them interact, and I said something to him about, this guy is really full of himself, and he's really not, um, you know, I forget how I put it, but whatever I said sort of put this guy down, and this young musician was saying, "Well, I don't understand. What do you mean? He's great. He's really wonderful." I said, "No, he's really, he's really full of himself and everything." I mean, as soon as said that, I realized, you know, that I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have, um, you know, that wasn't right for me to say that. And um, and it was right after that you had, or maybe it was right before that, that you had spoken about right speech and being attuned in speech, and I realized that that's really not um, being my best when I'm making that kind of statement. So there were just a lot of ways in which what you said came back as very real. One thing that keeps disturbing me though, and this goes beyond just integrity, but when you talk about mindfulness and then you talk about not being in your, getting out of your mind, um, it's kind of what it's ironic, and I don't really. Every time you say mindfulness, I kind of cringe because it's really more being in the, as you said, in the whole context of how we are. So that's just a thought. But thank you so much. This has been really instructive, and it's been hard because I haven't been present for the sessions themselves, and so I wasn't doing as much meditation as, regular meditation as I sometimes am, and so it wasn't as effective in that way. But a lot of what you said really struck a chord for me. Thank you.
You're welcome, Richie. Like the mindfulness word too, I'm not sure it's the best translation of sati. But if you said something like heartfulness, I think it would sound a little too precious in English. It doesn't quite capture it. But it the word actually is memory. It's related to the word for memory. So it's sort of like remembering to be present is maybe the best translation of sati. But it somehow ended up in English as mindfulness. And that word mind, yeah, doesn't necessarily quite have the right tone to it. I appreciate you translating. Do your best to be your best. I think that's helpful, and I appreciate your example of wrong speech, so to speak. Non-intuitive speech is very, very apropos. And one of the ways that I think about that, words are so powerful, and and it sounds a little archaic to talk about curses and blessings sometimes, but we do put curses on people when we when we influence their minds negatively, so that it's like that young musician who was getting something out of this relationship, this mentorship relationship. It's like you cast a spell on him, so to speak. It's casting a spell. And those spells have real power. The things we say about people have real power. We have real influence over other people. So it's important to be aware of that and to only offer things that are actually going to be constructive and wholesome. So let's see. Diane, you had your hand up and then you didn't.
Yeah, it felt
you want
weird.
to say something? It's okay to leave your hand up while I'm talking.
Okay. I've also really appreciated this first course that I've done, but I think I think it was the first session, the idea of wholesomeness. I just find it popping up throughout the day. And one place that I feel it before I even think about it for sure is when there is gossip. And there's often a fine line, like we have a concern about a colleague, and it starts off with expressing concern, but then I just start feeling uncomfortable when it crosses over into, I think, what could be considered gossip.
Mm-hmm.
Last night, we had a meeting of a lot of disgruntled people to talk about unionizing and other solutions, but it often went off into attacks of certain people. And it's funny, this morning at work, I asked someone, what did you think of last night? Because I got in my car and I just felt terrible. And he said, I didn't feel good after that. And it was so funny because I was thinking it just felt unwholesome, even though the intent was to come up with solutions. There was a lot of that sort of gossip. And it's interesting that I'm just now more aware of the feeling. And when I feel that unwholesome feeling, it's sort of like why, and exploring why. And something I never did before. It's like becoming more, I guess, metacognition, or however it is, being aware of the awareness and trying to figure out.
There's a signal. The unwholesome feeling sends a signal that you can pay attention to.
Yeah.
You might not know right away what's unwholesome is going on, but you can feel it. You can recognize it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when you're talking someone down, it's usually unwholesome. There are, as you said, there are these problem situations where you do have to talk about other people that are not present and kind of figure out what to do about them. But you can easily cross over a line to complaining and tearing down and those sorts of things. It's very easy to do that. In the name of something that's constructive, you veer off because we have these places inside of us that just kind of want to get back at people, or there's just places of meanness and separation that we're operating under, and we can easily be in the trance of them, very easily be in the trance of them. And so I and certainly probably everybody here has been at meetings where we've left with that unwholesome feeling, like something got let out that was not helpful, was more about meanness than it was helpful. So thank you for that example. Okay, Rich, and then Beth.
Hey there. Now I have to remember to unlower my. There we go. Okay. Uh, um, the
You're looking very
example that.
monk-like in your orange shirt and
Thank
your
you. It's a
thin,
Halloween
thin haircut.
5K shirt. Um, the example of meanness that you just mentioned reminded me of retreat I went to that Pema Chodron spoke at, and there was a young lady who asked her a question about like what she should do when people around her were speaking unskillfully, or like when Diane had mentioned gossip, and also maybe like what to do with like real aggressive type A kind of behavior, and Pema Chodron quickly assured the young student that all the meetings of the monks and spiritual leaders that she was in, that type A kind of thing existed there too, and that
It does, yes.
so that just in my kind of it was like a year or two into meditating at that point, and that struck my young meditating mind is pretty funny that you're not transcending a higher plane with people, even when they're people that you admire. There's still that real basic human quality.
The capacity for meanness is there.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add to Paula's comment that um I also too immediately went to Marion Barry and the other Washington. You were in Seattle, Washington, but I was like immediately thinking about Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
That's all.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Rick. So let's see, Beth, you were going to say something. You still want to?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I'm curious what you or anybody has to say about when you know something's not wholesome or out of integrity, and you like can't stop yourself, and you just like, especially when you repeat the same thing over and over, and it just feels like you can't stop it, and I don't know what to say about that except that it feels like suffering.
It is suffering. Yeah. There's something compulsive about it. You don't feel free. Even just saying aloud, I don't seem to be able to stop this. There's a moment of wholesomeness. Sometimes we have to like seed little moments of wholesomeness into our unwholesomeness. So to be honest with ourselves about, I can't seem to stop. I don't know what complaining about this person. I can't seem to stop thinking about nasty things about this person. Just a moment of non-delusion is very powerful. I can't stop, and I wonder why. I wonder why I can't. I wonder what holds me here. So just a moment of curiosity. And even if then your mind goes back into its, we've all had this, I'm sure, when you kind of get stuck on something, triggered, as they say, and something triggers you and you get in these loops, these compulsive kind of mental loops. It's nonetheless possible to step out of them for at least a moment and say, I'm in a compulsive mental loop. And that can give you just enough kind of stepping out that maybe you're not in it quite as much. Just those moments of kind of stepping out. And then sometimes if you bring another human being in and you admit it to them, that adds extra force to the wholesomeness. If you actually kind of tell another human being, I'm in this, I'm thinking about this thing that someone said, and I'm just so, wrapped up in it, and I keep thinking of mean things to say back. There's something about saying it to another human being. I mean, perhaps that other human being gives you a little bit of empathy or something that will help. And of course, the thing that's going to help the most is to deeply ask, what is the suffering here? When our mind gets pointed at another human being in a negative kind of way, or a situation, if it's not one particular human being, but we get kind of fixated on a situation or a human being, and we're blaming it, and it helps to inquire, what's going on here? This is suffering. And that's another thing to say is a non-diluted statement. This is suffering. It's one of my favorite quotations from the Buddhist sutras, because they're always saying it, idam dukkam. This is suffering. And sometimes just saying that makes it so clear. And then the inquiry is, so this is suffering. What is the suffering that this is arising from inside of me? Because the mind wants to look out there, and it wants to blame, it wants to, feel injured, feel victimized. It does all sorts of things other than feel the pain directly. Like, what hurt? What hurts? What actually hurts in me now? And to ask that question. In my experience, the mind resists that really strongly. It wants to keep you several layers out from the pain. It wants to make it about out there. And ironically, that hurts too. I mean, to be kind of in an obsessive thought about someone else or some other situation in an angry, unhappy way is also unhappiness. But it's like your mind prefers that to actually going for what really hurts. What really hurts about this? Or as I sometimes say, who's hurting inside? I make it in the third person because sometimes that it's a little end run around it in a certain way. If you say, who's hurting inside? It's like you see the being you are who's affected by this. And if you can touch that real suffering, it will diffuse whatever seems like it's coming from that side. Basically, people can't do anything to us without our permission. So if they make us feel bad about ourselves, we have to kind of give permission to them to let them do that. If, whatever they say, I mean, obviously, if somebody's hitting you or is, aiming a gun at you, there's a whole nother level here where you can be hurt without giving any permission. But so oftentimes on the verbal level, on the situational level, the hurt is actually something right inside, and we are cooperating with our own hurt in some way by believing something, by taking it in. And so I sometimes find, for instance, if somebody says something negative about me and I can't quite let it go, I want to look inside and say, okay, what in me believes that that's true? What in me actually accepts that as true? Let me go there. Well, it's not really their fault. I mean, it is. They're the occasion, but they've really just activated something that was already here. And I gave them permission to curse me in some way with their negative judgment. And I did that because I'm doing it too. I'm doing that too. So you kind of have to do this 180 from the mind that's focused out there to what's actually happening here. All right, everyone. So be well. Happy Halloween. Happy Samhain, which is the Celtic festival of this time of year. It's kind of like New Year's. This is when the Celtic year starts. And it's a time when we are closest to the spirit world. So be well.